Where, oh, where is Calvin Ridley? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Thursday night football game between the Saints and the Jaguars, plus a little bit of commotion at the end of the show. Kate, we've got to start with Calvin Ridley, who basically a no-show on Thursday. 1 catch for 5 yards on 4 targets, did get 1 carry for 0 yards. What happened?
That's a great question. This like roller coaster of production for the Jaguars receiving core is making me nauseous. It seems like the most consistent asset on a week-to-week basis continues to be Christian Kirk, but the
Should that be
boom.
surprising? To me, I
No,
don't feel like that's surprising at all.
this is the most unsurprising discourse that I can offer you. Christian Kirk is the consistency guy. Calvin Ridley is the guy with a very low ceiling, perhaps much lower than we thought, and occasional boom weeks. And that is the most basic analysis that we could have offered. And yet somehow I think fantasy football analysts managed to overcomplicate it a bit. But I think this is part of the Calvin Ridley experience, and it's not a good one. So, you know, what do you do with Calvin Ridley? You can't sell him after this week. You can't trade him away.
Here's what it comes down to me. And I mean, I've had this thought for a while. I tweeted it last night the first time. Christian Kirk's just a better player. I mean, I know people want Calvin Ridley to be, that guy. And there was shades of this in what year would this been? 2019 when he had his really good season. But Kirk has been the better player for the last several years. He's also the younger player. He's a better fit in this offense. To me, the one play that was so shocking was they gave the ball to Calvin Ridley on a reverse, and it was blocked really well, and he got 0 yards on it. There's just a different, and then you saw Christian Kirk at the end of the game. He took a little whip route, 40 yards for a touchdown. There's just such a difference in what these guys can do after the catch. It's just so much easier to get the ball to Kirk in space and let him make plays after the catch. While Calvin Ridley, you've got to throw really accurate and precise passes. I think Ridley is going to be just in a role going forward where he's the number 2 receiver. And just depending on certain matchups, you just might not want to play him.
I think that I'm going to offer a comparison here, and maybe you'll hate it, but Deontay Johnson is the Christian Kirk of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and maybe Calvin Ridley's the George Pickens, where
without the ability to make big plays down the field.
Yeah. It's tough. You know what? I think the biggest hit, right, for Calvin Ridley so far this season has been the lack of touchdowns, right? The first 3 years of his career, 26 total touchdowns. We got pretty spoiled. And then he had the breakout season in 2020, almost 1,400 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. Like, that was the first time he had put together a complete season. And largely outside of that one season, it hasn't necessarily been a complete season. You've either had the touchdown or the yardage. And right now you don't really have either. And
5 games with 40 or fewer receiving yards right now. Like, I don't want to tell you that like you shouldn't be starting Calvin Ridley, but like he's nothing more than a flex play at this point. I don't see it getting better because they still have Christian Kirk. Zay Jones didn't even play in this game, and we know how much this team loves Zay Jones. Once he gets back, those even more targets are going to get taken away from Ridley. I don't see it. I didn't see it during the offseason. And we talked about this back in August. I was drafting Christian Kirk over Calvin Ridley. Most Dynasty people had it differently, and it's still that case right now on Dynasty League football. Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 24, and then we've got Christian Kirk as wide receiver 32. I don't see why those guys shouldn't be flipped there.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. And you know what? The team has the financial investment in Christian Kirk. Like the move to trade Calvin Ridley, not necessarily a like a stunner, right? Like it's not. What did they give up? I can't even
So I think it
remember.
was a second round pick, but it was, I mean, it was a second round pick that was later in the draft. You know, it was like in the 50s,
Yeah, like
late 50s.
it wasn't a ton. Like that's a kind of low risk proposition. But the most interesting thing that I think we're probably not talking about in the Calvin Ridley discourse is the fact that he is still on his rookie contract, which means he is going teams are going to need to make a decision, right? This is the final year of his rookie deal. He is a free agent next year. That can like that's something interesting.
I don't think he gets a huge deal. I really don't, because he's going to be 29 next year.
Do we really think that he gets an extension with the Jaguars?
If I had to bet, I bet he gets like a 2-year extension worth $30 million.
It's more than I would have thought.
But it's probably right in that range. Well, Jacoby Myers got 13 million last year, so I think it's a little bit more than that. Because
just double check, by the way, it's a 4th round pick that becomes a 3rd based on playing time, or a 2nd if he receives a extension. So
interesting. I forgot about that last part.
yeah, that is very interesting because they can move on, right? Like, and okay, so a later 3rd round pick, like okay, like whatever, and you can be scot free. You can rinse your hands of Calvin Ridley. So I think that aspect of this conversation is probably the most underrated one. He is, just about to turn 29 years old and still playing on his rookie deal. And what's after this season is not a given.
So what do you do with Calvin Ridley in your dynasty leagues right now? I mean, obviously you have to hold him, but is he somebody that you're even really considering as a flex play, or do you kind of put him on your bench until we see a little bit more week-to-week consistency?
I mean, based on where we're at in the season, right? We've got bye weeks, we've got a lot of injuries. Like I don't know necessarily that Calvin Ridley is a guy that most dynasty teams, especially given the lack of waiver wire availability, the deep benches, Calvin Ridley might not be a guy you can afford to sit, but this is again one of those options where you probably expect a down week and count on him to maybe win you a week with a game and be pleasantly surprised. But your expectations have to be fairly low. And I think the team that has Calvin Ridley needs to have a stable of very steady other contributors. And Calvin Ridley's the punctuation mark. Whereas, like Calvin Ridley cannot be the foundation of your receiving core at this point.
I think I would be looking to move. I mean, for a couple of reasons. Jacksonville just plays one game in the next, I think, 20 days. They've got a bye coming up. So basically, you're just not going to have Calvin, and you're not going to have any faith trusting him next week at Pittsburgh, right? Well, maybe you will if you.
I think that's probably the one spot you might be able to get. Like,
we'll see
some good wide receivers. I mean, one of either Christian Kirk or Calvin Ridley will eat the Pittsburgh Steelers for breakfast. So
just
maybe
Kate's a hater. That's all it is.
Maybe, yeah. The terrible towel sitting, right behind my head. I know this team's weaknesses. So honestly, Marcus, I would wait to see if that big explosion game comes.
Maybe that's the thing is you wait till after this week, after Pittsburgh, because then the schedule gets hard. They play San Francisco 2 weeks later after the bye. Maybe just wait, see if Calvin Ridley can have any kind of, if he can rejuvenate his career at all. I want to talk about your Saints, Kate, because I know how much you love watching this Saints team. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. There is a lot of uncertainty in the world today, and it's important to be prepared. That's why you have to check out the Jase case. The Jase case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. You can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Don't get caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jase will handle everything. They'll take care of the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Go to jasemedical.com and enter promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That is promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. Don't get caught unprepared. We also want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options available, including spreads, player props, overs, unders, and so much more. They also have a ton of boosts like every Sunday. They've got some great same game parlays. It's so much fun. I love futures bets. I love picking division winners or who's going to win the MVP award. So go check out those odds. They're all available right now on FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanisha Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and so much more. Plus, get in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Kate, let's talk about the Saints. If you just looked at the box score, another good day for the Saints, right? Derek Carr, once again, over 300 yards, has a passing touchdown. Alvin Kamara, 29 touches, including 12 catches for 91 yards. Before we dive into Kamara, what do you think about this offense as a whole?
My God, is it so bad, Marcus? It is, again, this is one of those things where if you don't watch the games and you look at the box score, you would not have any sort of concept how bad this team is. And the thing is, they have all of the right pieces, maybe except for quarterback, but the last piece of that puzzle could be very, very well right on the bench there. They've got Chris Olave. They've got Rashid Shaheed, who's absolutely playing out of his mind, has one of the best non-touchdowns that I think I've seen so far this season. Had no business being that close of a touchdown because he plucks the ball out of thin air on a terrible throw from Derek Carr that looked like he was trying to send it in a rocket to outer space. This team is a disaster. Derek Carr is a full-blown disaster. 58 pass attempts, 300 yards, a touchdown, an interception. It honestly probably could have been if the Jaguars had come up with some of these plays, there honestly could have been 7 different interceptions in this game.
Yeah, it was bad. And this just looks exactly what we've seen from Derek Carr basically the last several games. It's just a lot of checkdowns. When he does challenge defenses down the field, he throws the ball out of bounds. There's no connection with Chris Olave. Like, Olave had 7 catches for 57 yards, but there was a couple times where balls are just thrown so far behind him that he can't make a play. There's no run after the catch ability.
He gave up on some routes there, and I don't blame him. There was a point in the game where Derek Carr just airmails it. The ball looked like it went about 50 yards into the stands, and Chris Olave gives up on the route, and Derek Carr explodes. It was a terrible look, but it was a moment where you kind of felt everything that was wrong with this team. They're not on the same page. And again, the talent is there. Like Derek Carr has been capable of delivering a football in the past, but he needs to get on the same page with his receivers, and like he needs to do it quickly. And it either comes down to the fact that he's really bad at football or he's so injured that he's
I think that's
putting
what
his
it is.
team in jeopardy. And
Yeah.
like, at what point does your coaching staff say, you are jeopardizing our lineup and like you are a liability in the starting lineup? Like, because Jameis Winston, I think, can make several of those throws. Now, to Derek Carr's credit, did have the game-winning touchdown secured, basically.
Game tying touchdown. Yep.
The game tying touchdown, which would have put them in position to win if they went for two. Literally just bounced right off of Foster Moreau's hand. So like that was a perfectly delivered ball. It was probably the best throw Derek Carr had all night. But generally speaking, he is not. It hasn't been working, and I think that this coaching staff, if they want to get serious about winning games, until Derek Carr is healthy, you need to consider bringing Jameis Winston into this lineup, because these talents are going to waste just based on
Yeah.
the lack of chemistry, the lack of timing, and what I have to assume is Derek Carr playing through a lot of pain.
I will say in Derek Carr's defense a little bit, both starting tackles were out in this game, and Josh Allen just had his way with Anders Pete, who's playing tackle, who's usually the left guard. But I want to talk about Alvin Kamara because, Kate, I don't know if you've looked, but Kamara's only played 4 games this year, and he already has 35 receptions. 35 receptions. It's unbelievable. The amount of work that he's gotten is absolutely insane. I mean, he's on pace to have like 85, 90 catches in like a 13 game season, which is bonkers. How stable is this? Like, if you are in a win now window, should you consider going out and trading for Alvin Kamara, like considering that he's getting this much touch volume?
I'm going to be honest. I think that this is probably also a symptom of the position that this team is in terms of Derek Carr being in pain, wants to get the ball out quickly, doesn't want to get hit. And I think that that's sort of a probably testament also to the chemistry and trust that he has right now with his wide receivers. Like, yeah, Alvin Kamara 2 yards away from the line of scrimmage, that's probably your easiest option. At least you know you're going to get the completion there. Um, I'm not trusting that this is as stable as maybe we would think based on how significant that volume is. Like, again, because I think it's more of a symptom of circumstance than it is the fact that this team actually wants to get Alvin Kamara 15 targets per game. That is unsustainable if you want to win a football game.
The other thing that for me is he has 104 targets in the last 104 touches, not targets, almost in the last 4 games, 1 touchdown, averaging 3.6 yards per carry. The only reason he's having success right now is based purely on volume. I mean, he's averaging 5 yards per reception, 3.8 yards, 3.6 yards per carry. Like, there's nothing there outside of the volume, and you just can't trust that on a week-to-week basis, especially now that Jamal Williams is back. Now, he didn't play a lot last night, but I've got to imagine with, the 10-day rest coming up, he's going to get more involved in this offense. We saw Taysom Hill get the goal line touchdown, which is annoying. I'm not going out of my way to give up a lot of assets for Alvin Kamara.
No, not at all. And Marcus, I mean, you bring up the like efficiency. Like, if there were even a normal amount of targets and receptions here for Alvin Kamara, I think we'd be talking about him very, very differently. Um, Alvin Kamara to this point hasn't played excellent football. In terms of misforced tackle rate, like a career low 11% misforced tackle rate. You mentioned it, 3.9 yards per carry, career low yards after contact per attempt. This hasn't been the same Alvin Kamara that we've seen in years past, right? Like, you can tell, right? He's getting up there in age. He's 28 years old, averaging a career high stuff rate on rush attempts. Like this, from a rushing perspective, has not been a memorable year for Alvin
No.
Kamara. And I think that, generally speaking, that receiving work, maybe it continues in the next couple of games, but I think that this offense, we saw it with, Austin Eckler and the Chargers. Like, if you are looking to be competitive, you cannot be targeting the running back 10 to 15 times per game, especially when you
No.
have a treasure trove of assets, from Chris Olave. Michael Thomas has looked solid. Like, Rashid Shaheed playing out of his mind for, they found an absolute gem there. They cannot afford to continue to check down over and over and over
No.
again if they want to be competitive. And to be fair, like, this is a division that's very winnable, right? Like, their position, the NFC South, puts them in a very unique position to make a postseason run as a top 4 seed if they can get their crap together. And I don't know.
It just hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet.
Team
No,
Jameis.
yeah, Team James. Let's do some commotion, guys, that you should promote from your bench into your starting lineups in Week 7 next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had playing daily fantasy sports. You can win up to 25 times your money this football season, which is absolutely fantastic. Plus, with the PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of the players gets injured. For NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, if one of the players you have exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, LockedOnNFL, and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com, use promo code LockedOnNFL to get a first deposit match up to $100. We also want to let you guys know about DoorDash. We absolutely love DoorDash. So why root for your favorite team and your favorite sport on an empty stomach? Order on DoorDash and save on football watch parties this season. Order pizza, wings, sodas, burgers, or even just buns on DoorDash and get it all delivered without missing the game. All of your restaurant favorites and stores from retail to grocery are on the app, so you can shop everything you need to get game day ready. Get prepared before game day. Stock up on your favorite appetizers and order all of your tailgate gear on DoorDash, and then get ready to watch your team win. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. That's a 50% off discount up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter promo code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. It's our favorite part of the week. It's promotion commotion. Kate, let's talk about some players that we are promoting from our bench into our starting lineups in Week 7.
All right, this one's gonna be gross, but if you were luckily one of the people to maybe snag Jaleel McLaughlin off of waivers early on, and I think this is a week where maybe you can start him. I know Javonte Williams is back in the mix. Had week 6 return, and Jaleel McLaughlin actually outsnapped Javonte Williams in his return from injury. Led all the Broncos running backs with 12 routes run, totaled 9 touches on a day. And now they get a matchup against the Packers. Their run defense ranks top 5 in EPA per play allowed against the run, allowing the 6th most rushing yards, 6th most fantasy points per game to running backs. I think if this split continues, which it I don't think they have any reason not to, right? Jaleel McLaughlin has been playing really good football, and he's been very efficient, more efficient than Javonte Williams. If they continue this split, and if Jaleel McLaughlin gets at least 10 carries, I feel like this is a spot where he might break one of these off for a touchdown.
Yeah, I don't mind that one all. I've got another running back that I'm going to mention, Craig Reynolds for the Lions. No David Montgomery this week. Jahmyr Gibbs sounds like he's going to play, but I still don't know how healthy he is. Last week in limited action, 10 carries for Reynolds. He also got 2 receptions. If you're looking just for an RB2 on good offense in a decent matchup, I kind of like Craig Reynolds this week.
Only thing to keep an eye on, Craig Reynolds popped up on the injury report with toe and hamstring injuries. So, I mean, the Detroit Lions, man, they are in a rough spot with their running backs, but keep an eye on that. I'll give you guys one more. And this is just going to be me continuing to shout out Rashee Rice, who, probably went back to your bench after you saw the move that the Kansas City Chiefs made to reacclaim Mecole Hardman and traded for him. But Rashee Rice is still the best wide receiver on this team. Justin Watson, who's played as a starting wide receiver for this team, dislocated his elbow, which is the grossest injury I've ever heard. But Rashee Rice, despite the fact that he's not out there running the most routes, still leads the wide receiver core in total receptions, receiving yards, has the second highest target rate on routes run among those Chiefs wide receivers. And this week, they're playing the Los Angeles Chargers, allowing, a league high, almost 20% explosive pass rate. Lots of upside for the wide receiver, allowing almost 40 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. I don't pump the brakes on Rice just because of the Mecole Hardman news. Justin Watson's absence, I think, is going to be a huge opportunity for Rice to maybe get, some reps on the outside. And this is a matchup, if any, that you're going to feel really good about his potential upside. I think I have him ranked as wide receiver 26 on the week.
I like it. I think they're bringing in Mecole Hardman to basically as like Darius Toney insurance and maybe even a little bit of Sky Moore insurance, which I don't know why you need Sky Moore insurance, but I get it. They probably just want a little bit of a speed element to the offense. That's not Rashee Rice's game anyways. His is playing in the slot, making plays after the catch, being a physical receiver. I agree with you. I also will mention if Deontay Foreman is still out there, I know he's only owned in 30% of leagues. They play the Raiders this week. The Raiders' run defense is not very good. And I can't imagine the Bears throwing the ball a lot with our guy Tyson Bagnet, T-Bag, starting this week for Chicago. So I like Deontay Foreman in this matchup. Just one more guy if you're in need of some running back help. But that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Make sure you check out the show on YouTube where we post shows every single day. Kate, you and I back on Monday to break down all of the action from week 7. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Enjoy the games, and we'll see you right back here on Monday.